Now we are going to be discussing about the structure of the atom. We all know about the Dalton atomics theory. According to the theory, we learn that the atoms are indivisible, but in reality, atoms are not indivisible. We will learn about this thing in this video. So there are three subatomic particles: the proton, electrons, and the neutrons. The protons, electrons, and neutrons are subatomic particles. Means that these are the particles which are smaller than the size of the atom. So that means these three particles are divisible. And about these particles, the discovery we are going to be discussing in this video. The scientist whose name was J.J. Thomson discovered the particle. He discovered the particle by using the cathode ray tube. So, not by the cathode ray tube, he discovered the particle by using a discharge tube, and at one end he put the cathode. So, cathode and the cathode emitted the positive. Sorry. So, in a discharge tube, at one end he put the cathode. Cathode is basically a negative electrode. So, at one end he put the negative electrode. When the electricity was passed with high voltage and when the pressure was reduced very much, when the pressure was reduced in that cathode ray tube, and when the electricity with high voltage was needed to pass through this that tube, then a fluorescent glow was observed. It was observed that the negative cathode was emitting the electrons. These streams of particles were given by the cathode. Now, what did J.J. Thomson said about these streams of electrons? J.J. Thomson, the scientist who discovered it, the scientist who found that there were negative electrons, said that it was actually the cathode ray tube which emitted these negatively charged particles, and then these negatively charged particles reacted with the atoms. So the pressure in that discharge tube was not made it to go zero, but there was some pressure still, there's some air still left in that cathode ray tube. Because of that, the negative electrons emitted by the cathode ray, the negative electron emitted by the cathode reacted with those electrons present in the atom inside the discharge tube, and because of that, their negative repulsion happened, and because of that, the negative electrons were now out of the shell. Now, what is the meaning of shell? What are the KLM and cell? These things we're going to be discussing later on. But for now, just understand the fact that there are shells. So negative electrons was pushed out of its shell, and because of that, it moved rapidly. So the negative electrons started moving rapidly at a tremendous speed, and that's how he discovered the particles called electrons. So that's all about the discovery of the particles called electrons. The magnitude of charge of a particle called electron is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulombs, and the mass of the electron is 9.1 into 10 to the power minus 31 kg, which is negligible. Now we are going to be discussing about the discovery of protons. So protons are basically the positive charged particles, and the discovery of them we are going to be discussing about. See, proton was discovered by another scientist named E. Goldstein. E. Goldstein put the anode ray tube on one end of a discharge tube. So there was one, and on one end there was anode ray tube, anode sorry, put on the discharge tube. So the anode are basically the positive electrode. So that was put on the discharge tube. Anode, because anode emit the positive particles. So when the electricity was made to pass through the discharge tube at high voltage, then it was discovered that anode was formed. Anode emitted the positive particles, which were the protons, and that's how protons were discovered. Now, what did the scientist E. Goldstein said on this experiment which he performed? He said that that's because of the reason that the electricity which is going through the discharge tube is making the electrons inside their shells to go out of it. So because of it, now there is only the positive charge particle left in the atom. Now positively charged particle is concentrated at the center, and these things we are going to be discussing about later on in the video. Now after they get detached from their electron, these fast moving positive proton move with a tremendous speed, and that's how he discovered the proton. So that's what he said. Thanks for watching the first part of the video. The charge of a proton is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb, and the mass of a proton is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 27 kilograms.